Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Is that even on? I don't even know if it's on. Or do you have to be right there? It's on?
You're good.
Slide it down. Good morning. All right. I'm so excited everybody's here. Super excited to be with you all this morning. This is a long time in the making, and a lot of work and effort has been put forth up to this point. But happy to say we're at another starting point here in the room with all of our community partners and stakeholders for what is to come. And just want to introduce myself. I'm Jennifer Tuckwiller. I am the chair for the Beaufort Regional Chamber of Commerce. I'm the chair of the board, and just want to welcome you all here today. We are going to take a moment right now to go through the room. If you'll just say your name and who you're here with, just so we all know who is here and who we're representing today. Jennifer Tuckwiller, chair of the board.
Eric Greenway, Beaufort County. Stephen Murray, City of Beaufort. Darrell Willis, Town of Fort Royal.
Jen Cobbs, Chamber of Commerce.
Graham Summerall, Chamber of Commerce.
Matt.
Jimmy Boozer, MEC.
Alice Howard, County Council.
Ed Saxon, MEC.
Aaron Gadd, Chamber of Commerce.
Ed Bale, Department of Veteran Affairs.
Greg Shelton, Town of Fort Royal.
Christina Wilson, Chamber. Janet Gresham, Chamber. Caroline Brumman, Chamber and MEC. Liz Mitchell, Chamber.
Charlie Stone, Beaufort County Economic Development.
Rita Wilson, Chamber.
Nick Messenberg, Chamber.
John O'Toole, Beaufort County Economic Development.
Mary Lee Carnes, the Technical College of the Low Country. Jessica Bridges, the Chamber.
Reese Berthoff, City of Beaufort. Will Prokup, City of Beaufort.
Eric Skipper, University of South Carolina, Beaufort.
Whitney Richland, County.
Chris Fisher, Chamber.
Dick Stewart, Devin Phillips, Fort Royal.
Megan Morris, Chamber.
Paul from Dallas, the MEC, the Beaufort County EDC, and also the Great Island.
Neil Lipsitz, City of Beaufort. Phil Crowler, City of Beaufort. Dave Hall, also Technical College of the Low Country.
Evan Wheeler, James.
Thomas Taylor, James. Neil Puglisi, MEC. Ian Scott, Chamber.
And Zachary Payne with Matrix Design.
Great. Thank you all again for being here. First order of business, this is our regularly scheduled Chamber Board of Directors meeting. We have one quick item to take a vote to get our routine business done. Chamber Board, you have a consent agenda that was sent out. I will accept a motion to approve the consent agenda as submitted.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor? Any opposed? Abstentions? Thank you. Chamber business is done. Moving on, I have the great pleasure of introducing Neil Puglisi, the chairman of the MEC.
Thank you, Jennifer. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good to see you all today. This is a very, very important day for us. This is going to be sort of a kickoff for a very, very important effort for us, for the community. A special thanks to all of those, representing us from the federal level, the state level, the county level, the city, the town of Fort Royal, all the other business leaders, community leaders here. Thank you very much for showing up here today. And also our MEC, those in the MEC, hey, thank you very much. It's been a long time coming, this little effort right here, but we're moving forward. Okay. A little bit of an update. April of this year, the Navy announced that they had intentions of moving from their current site to Marine Corps Air Station, where they're going to be tenants of the air station. They're currently going through the preparatory steps to make that move, but I will tell you that move, and anyone knowing government or knowing how that process works, it's about an eight-year process. So it isn't we decide we're going to move and then all of a sudden next year we're moving. No, it has to go through things like the NDA, the programming of operations and maintenance funds, the allocation, and so it's got to go through that process. So it's about an 8-year process. Now some folks may say, 8 years, that's a long time. No, 8 years is not a long time. 8 years is like that. And so, as I often say, those who have a plan, codified plan, they win. Those who have ideas which are not codified, they go to the back of the line. And so our effort here is to go ahead and develop a plan or set the underpinnings for making a plan so we can move forward. Okay, so we know that process is about an 8-year process. The adjunct to that, of course, is the Veterans Administration activity, which is also at the Naval Hospital at present. Now, the Veterans Administration, which is on the 4th floor of the Naval Hospital at present, they have a much accelerated timeline because they're working under a different construct. So the Veterans Administration is looking to relocate from the Naval Hospital grounds out into the Beaufort area, north of the Broad. They're looking at sites that accommodate 100,000 square foot facility on 8 to 12 acres with 500 parking spaces. And they want to make this clinic, sort of like the focal point for all of those who are being serviced. The 25,000 there in Beaufort County that are being serviced, and also the spillover from Jasper County. So this is going to be a pretty big effort here. Now, their timeline is 2024, 2025. And the reason why they can move a lot quicker than the Naval Hospital can is because they're working with an effort which acquires the property, designs and builds, and then that entity manages the property for the VA on a long-term 50-year lease. So they can move a lot quicker than that because this is not a U.S. government acquisition of the property. It's their leasing, designing, building. Someone's doing that for them, so they can move a lot quicker. Okay, and again, I often like to say, the reason why we're going through this process is because there are 3 kinds of people in the world, 3 kinds of organizations: those who let things happen, those who make things happen, those who wonder what the hell happened. We don't want to be the ones who wonder what happened. We want to come out and have a plan. Again, those who have a plan win. Those who don't have a plan, codified plan, go to the back of the line. Now, the MEC, in concert with the Chamber, and thank you very much, Jennifer and Ian. The Chamber, we've retained Matrix Design, or the Matrix group. Matrix is, and they're going to talk about this. Zachary's going to talk about that. But this is in their wheelhouse. And what we've asked Matrix to do is to examine all the different permutations of what could occur on that piece of real estate. And of course, we'll have the formation of a task force. We'll ask various stakeholders to go ahead and contribute to that task force. It'll be pretty much a focused effort. And it'll follow loosely around the lines of how the U.S. government does their plan. So when we ultimately present our plan to entities of the U.S. government, they will recognize it and they will see that we've done the research. And so their charge is to call balls and strikes, no agendas, come in with a clean slate, and then tell us all the different permutations that could be leveraged at that particular site. And so we're very, very excited about that. Now, following today, Scott is going to come out to the various stakeholders and say, we would like your nominees to this task force. And we're going to be asking folks from the county, the folks from the city, the folks from the town of Fort Wood, the MEC, a representative from the MEC, a representative from the Chamber. So he's going to come out and ask for nominees to that. And that is going to be a very exciting effort. And of course, we'll get each strike briefs on their findings along the way. Now, what I would respectfully request is that you hold all your questions until the end. We'll get through the brief. Hold your questions until the end, but we're going to answer every single question that's out there. Okay, with that, I'm going to turn this over to Zachary. Zachary, you got it.
Awesome. Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right, as he said, we're going to kind of walk through. This will be a little bit of an education session, kind of a 101, maybe call it even some myth busting. We want to just kind of lay some foundation of what has to happen for some of these different ideas, the permutations that he talked about to happen. There's processes, not surprising. The federal government has plenty of process that you have to follow, and so our goal here as his first shot across the bow is to provide a little insight into those processes. I'll hit the wave tops. The presentation's pretty dense in terms of getting into some of those details. We'll share that after the fact, and of course I'll ask your question, or excuse me, answer your questions as we go. Quick agenda, go through some introduction about Matrix and our background and our relationship with the MEC. Going to kind of talk about background, that a little more detail that Ian talked about with respect to the moves, the potential moves, and really what's factual, what we know, and then versus what folks are hearing. And that's really important part of the process. We'll kind of go over an overall problem statement that kind of frames what we're doing on behalf of the MEC and the Chamber and y'all. And then we'll get into a little bit of 101 on how the federal government deals with its real property, and then a little one-on-one and kind of the approach the next 8 months or so of our effort and what that's going to look like, supporting y'all and helping you get to the end. And then some next steps and, of course, some Q&A. So a little bit about Matrix. We are about a 200-person firm, headquartered in the Colorado area. However, if you look at that map, a lot of those dots all over the country, you'll see some concentration in Colorado. We're an engineering firm at our core, land development, environmental, structural. We do that at our core. But when you look at all the dots across the country, that's the work that I do. It's military planning, where we're going to defense communities like this, and we are helping the community. We're helping them with code rewrites. We're helping them with encroachment management planning. The Low Country Council of Governments just finished up a military installation resiliency review. That's right in our wheelhouse. That's what we do. We come into the community, we look at their situation there, and then we look at the best practices that we've gained over years of doing this, and we try to help the community protect and grow the military mission there, because we know the military brings high-paying jobs, super economic impact, and there's goodness in having them at the core. Obviously, it's at the core of this community as well. Myself, Zachary Payne, I have been doing this for about 15 years, both in uniform as well as a government civilian, and now on the outside. Been all over the country, as well as served overseas in this capacity. So we have a really good understanding both of the internal processes as well as the external processes as a consultant. We had hoped to have a couple others with me. Sal Najumian, he's our CEO. He's actually down in Florida right now. The Association of Defense Communities is what this is all about. He's a board member there, and he's actually hosting for Florida a regional ADC event. Charlie Parham is well on our team. Again, similar background, 25 plus years, Air Force, and doing this type of work. He's actually in Arkansas. So we were in Arkansas, or he was in Arkansas last night. They're trying to grow, get some additional aircraft there. The environmental impact statement, public notification and opening for public comment was last night. So we were there, we were present at that activity. One thing that I will tell you is that what we are not lobbyists. We do not lobby. That's not our job. Now we do go work with the federal, the military, as well as community partners throughout the country, because we know them. We have good relationships, but we're not lobbyists. We partner with lobbyists when we need to, and we could do that here if it got to that point in time, but that's not what we're here for. We're here to lay the groundwork, do the analysis, come forward with a cogent strategy and approach, and then run from there. From our relationship with the MEC, we've been here, I was just talking to Ian before, we're coming up on 1 year. So about first week in October, I believe, of last year, we had a kickoff with the MEC and with the Chamber, and met several of the folks in the room. And that initial effort and that initial RFP that went out was for strategic communication. We're not a strategic communications firm. However, we saw the Beaufort region, we saw the military installations here, we reviewed the economic impact analysis that the university did, and we said, hey, we can help. There's several things in the works, one being the Commandant of the Marine Corps saying, hey, maybe we move and close Parris Island. Well, that's obviously gets a community kind of a little up in arms, and so we read all that and we said, hey, we're not a strategic communication firm, but we certainly can help them, and looking at this as a long-term relationship, playing the long game, we think there's an opportunity for us to really add value here. And so we went after that RFP. We were selected. We went through a rebranding effort for the MEC. We went through, developed a new website, social media accounts, and really kind of got all that information out there. We didn't do that. We partnered with Digital Mules, who did a lot of that legwork on our behalf. But it was great. It was a great effort. We got to know a lot more people, and now you have stuff out there. So a plug, go to the website, go to the social media, give it a follow, because we're trying to grow that as an information sharing platform. But then after that effort was complete, it was all about follow-on support. How can we help you guys? A couple things that I mentioned. Resiliency is big for all the military installations in this region. It's really big in the federal government. They're putting a lot of resources in that area, and so a job as a consultant is to help you guys get access to that through grants and through other opportunities. The Defense Community Infrastructure Program, we can help facilitate that, and so that was a big part of it. The Naval Hospital and really is this initial focus, and that's namely because we know something's happening. They've published it, and so let's get out in front of it. It's a perfect opportunity for the MEC to lead, the community to come together, and to put together a really good strategy and approach. And then, of course, stakeholder engagement. I talked a little bit about that. We are pretty well connected, and we use those connections to help move our clients forward. All right, enough about that. So quick background, kind of going over what Neil said, just in a little more detail, a little more clarification. Defense Health Agency is now responsible for all military health care. That happened a few years ago. There's a published reason why, and then the actual reasons why. The actual reasons why, it's efficiencies, right? They want to cut positions and cut the overall cost. So how do they do that? They consolidate it under this DHA, Defense Health Agency, and then they say, oh yeah, and then we'll push people out to industry. They're going to use the local market and take advantage of that. But ultimately, it's out of efficiencies. So based on that, what happened is DHA now looks at the whole portfolio. It's not Navy looking at it for the Marine Corps and the Navy. And so they said, all right, we're looking at all these duplicative efforts throughout these different regions. How do we refocus that and turn that into a more streamlined approach? And so we know for a fact that they have planning and design underway for an ambulatory care center at the air station as well as Parris Island. We know that they were originally in the FY25 MILCOM program, but based on cost escalation with respect to construction and other cost increases on projects, they've slid that to the right, currently in the FY27, FY28, to fund those projects, then follow on construction. So we know that's out there. We also know that from the published guidance that the Naval Hospital will not be a hospital in the future. It will be potentially an ambulatory surgery center and outpatient care clinic. So they're published right now. The NDAA says there will be a function there. Reading the tea leaves, which is what we do, we think that maybe that's not going to happen. And so that's kind of how we're going through this. There's facts and then there's a little bit of conjecture. We want to make sure we get it right. Looking at the Department of Veterans Affairs, this one is closer to the boat, as Neil said. FY23 budget, they have $23.6 million or something like that in the budget, and they are looking to acquire someone. The Fed Biz opportunities, it's published out there already. They're looking for someone that says, hey, I want to go build you a clinic and I want to lease it back to you. So that is out there right now, moving forward, and that's their approach. They have some other alternatives if that doesn't work out. But you look at that last bullet, none of those include remaining in the hospital. So we know that factually they are leaving the hospital and they're going to vacate an already underutilized facility. All right, Department of Navy. Department of Navy hasn't, and they can't, officially say that they are closing they are closing the hospital and closing that property. They have not said that. So we've met with the commanding officer at the installation. We've met with their public affairs folks. They are seeing the tea leaves the same as we are, but they cannot and have not said that anything's closing. They are aware of the ambulatory care centers. They're aware of all that happening. But again, officially, no Navy stance on that. We have received a lot of high-level support from the Navy with respect to this effort. So when you talk about community partnership program and working together with the communities and coming up with, creative alternatives outside the fence line, the Navy is woefully behind the other services. The Air Force has an Air Force Community Partnership Program at the headquarters. The Army has a similar construct, and they have a lot of examples of success stories all throughout the country. You go look at it for the Navy, there's not a lot there. So Navy leader at the highest level, Mr. Jim Balaki, he's the PDAS for energy installations in the environment. We met with him in the Pentagon, and he was all on board with this effort. He said, that would be awesome. We are looking for a pathfinder. We're looking for some success. He put us on with the regional commander, commander of Region Southeast, Admiral Wesley McCall, met with him as well, and he is all on board. In fact, the letter to the right, can't see it in the slides, that's a letter that he generated. We might have generated it on his behalf for him to consider signing, but he took that letter, changed it very little, sent it to the state, and said, hey, you need to give them some grant funds for this. We totally support it. We're not endorsing this, but we do support community partnerships and where they're going. And so we have some really strong endorsement at the highest level, and that goes a long ways when you get into some of these bureaucratic processes I'm going to talk about. All right, so that gets to the overall problem statement in our approach here. The community needs to be proactive in development and socialization of a long-range, community-driven plan for the highest and best use for the Naval Hospital Beaufort property. So a couple of things are underlined there: purposeful, community-driven. It's not me. I can't do anything. I can come and bring forth good ideas, and I can help you get to a cogent solution, but ultimately it's going to take the community to lead it to success. Proactive, that's what we're doing. This process, Neil mentioned it, a few years down the road, we're getting out way ahead of it, and we're going to bring a solution to the government that they're going to like. And then highest and best use of the naval, the property for the region. So that's really important as well. We got county, we got city of Beaufort, we got the town of Port Royal. We need to come together as a community-driven solution. Because the one thing that will be a non-starter in this process is if we come in and we don't have a united front. We got to come in with a solution, the easy button for the government that we're all behind, whether it's Port Royal, whether it's the city, whether it's the county, whether it's our local developers. Everyone's behind this. We support it. Then they're going to see that as all green check marks, all systems go. Let's move forward with that. And so that's a big part of this effort, is coming together, collaborating, and coming up with a community-driven decision. All right, now the dense part of this. Okay, so this is not fun stuff. I'm going to hit the wave tops, give you a good idea, and happy to answer questions. And again, we'll share the slides. So when you're talking about real property disposition, what is the federal government going to do with it? It really comes down to base realignment and closure, BRAC, you've probably heard that term, and then excess versus underutilized real estate. Excess, the federal agency, whoever it is, says, we do not need this property today, we do not need this property tomorrow, and we don't need it in the future. So someone else can have it. Underutilized property says, we don't have any need for this today, we don't know what the future holds, so we probably want to hang on to it, but maybe we can do something with it in the meantime. Okay, so those are your basic definitions. Excess, I don't need it today or tomorrow. Underutilized, I don't need it today, I might use it in the future, so let's hang on to it. And then BRAC is a totally separate. Important, foot stomp, that's why it's in the blue. There is no BRAC right now. Okay, BRAC is legislated. It's not here today. It's not on the horizon anytime soon. And the installation, the Navy, as I mentioned before, they have not declared any of the property of the 120-ish acres there as excess or underutilized. So that's a going-in position. We think we can get them to do that, but at this time, none of that has happened. So this is way early in the process. All right, BRAC. Basic process there. I'm going to go to my notes just to make sure I cover what I want to cover. So BRAC is legislated. So what does that mean? That means that in the NDAA, when it's published, the National Defense Authorization Act, it has language there for a base realignment and closure. BRAC is very, very contentious. Why is it contentious? Well, because you're going to close an installation. What happens when you close an installation? You lose jobs, you lose economic impact. Who cares the most about that? Our elected officials, our congressional delegates. They don't want to lose that in their region or in their district, because that's not going to look good on them. And so, full disclosure, that's why BRAC is as contentious as it is. There was a period from 2013 to 2017 until the services got told you're not allowed to request a BRAC anymore because it makes us look bad. The services came in every year and said, we want a BRAC, we want to close installations. So when you're looking at it from a national security perspective, the military saying, yeah, we don't really need those locations, but when it comes, push comes to shove, there's a lot of politics involved. So BRAC is a very contentious topic. But the key point there isn't one right now. And the other point there is it doesn't move fast. The BRAC process is a slow process because you get added to a list and then you have the local representatives and delegates say, well, we don't want our installation to be on the list. And then they make some backdoor deals at the last hour. There's an Air Force base in New Mexico that was on the BRAC list until like the night before, and now it's not. And so instead of closing that installation, they moved the whole special operations missions there and invested like upwards of $150 million in construction in the middle of nowhere, New Mexico. Not because it was the best interest of the military, but because they won. The politicians won. So that's BRAC. The key here, when you get a closure recommendation, so that is a way to disposition the property. If you're on that list, there's a closure. The next thing is what do you do now? Okay. It doesn't move fast. The service has 2 years to even act, to even move on that BRAC, and then it takes about 6 years for all the BRAC actions, the initial BRAC actions to take place. But it can take way longer than that for all the dust to settle and be cleaned up, because when that property is transferred, so too transfers all the encumbrances. And the DOD is not necessarily the cleanest operators, and so there is often a little bit of environmental issues that need to be cleaned up. You know, you might have heard of like a PFAS, PFOA, fuel leaks, all sorts of things. We did things not necessarily very clean. So all that has to be cleaned up as part of that BRAC process before it's transferred. And so sometimes that could take 20 plus years where these properties are encumbered. A key to this, though, is that the last sub-bullet there, communities often establish a local redevelopment authority. And so what is that? That is the community coming together and saying, hey, we want skin in the game. And so they say, we're going to create a local redevelopment authority that's going to oversee redevelopment of that property. That's actually how Matrix got its start back in the late 90s. We went to these communities where they were closed and said, hey, we do all this work. We do civil, we do environmental, we do planning. Why don't we help out? And so we worked for local redevelopment authorities way back then, Puebloplex, Texarkana, places that you're like, is there a military installation there? Well, there was apparently a long time ago when I was in high school, but now it's been totally redeveloped, and Matrix is still under contract on some of those places because we're cleaning up munitions and other things. And so in a BRAC, that local redevelopment authority is a community driven. It gets access to resources that others don't have to help clean up, and that's another big piece of BRAC. BRAC allows for funding to help you transition the property. But again, point of clarification, there's no BRAC right now, if I haven't said that yet. Just a quick example, Naval Training Center San Diego is part of the 1993 BRAC, 540 acres divided up into 10 parcels. So that's another piece of this in all this property, or all these examples you'll see. It doesn't have to be one solution. You can break up this property just like you would if you're developing a parcel of land. 10 parcels, some of it went to the DOD, some went to other federal agencies, some went to this local development authority that the city of San Diego commissioned. And then they created this, the picture's not great, but Liberty Station. So it's a mixed use redevelopment, great success story, taking old land that was underutilized there and transferring it into something awesome. You know, so if there was a BRAC here, you could do something like that. All right. So that was BRAC, and enough on that. Excess property. So this again, what's excess? We don't need it now, we don't need it tomorrow. It's a very prescriptive process. The 4 steps on the right, installation, federal agency says I have excess property. Then they set it to the GSA. GSA says, hey, any other federal agencies want this property? They say, no, we don't. Well, then it goes to become surplus property. The first shot at a surplus is, hey, government, local, state governments, sometimes nonprofits, are you interested in this property for a public use as well as a qualifying, and I'll get to that, a qualifying use. I'll get to that momentarily. They say no. Then it goes to a negotiated sale, which basically takes those clarifiers off with the state and local government. And they could say, we want the property for economic development, and they sell it to them. If it doesn't get to that point, it goes to public sale. That's a 4-step process. GSA, General Services Administration, they are the broker. They're the real property broker for the federal government, and they broker all these processes. So it goes from the military over to them, and military says, take care of that for us, just like you would with a real estate broker. Excess, highlighted out already. Installation says I have it. I have excess property I don't need. Again, hasn't happened at the hospital. But that's the kickoff the process that gets GSA engaged. Federal transfer. Goes up, says, hey, I don't want this property, goes out to all the other federal agencies. They have an opportunity to purchase the property from one agency and another at fair market value. Some exceptions to that rule. One thing when we talk about fair market value in this space, okay, the government will have the property assessed to get fair market value. They will also have to declare what the encumbrances are and their expectation of that cost. And so if there is restoration or reclamation work that needs to happen, then that will be part of that fair market value assessment. So property could be $10 million, but that government could estimate that there's $2 million in cleanup costs. So the fair market value of that property is going to be $8 million. From a potential buyer perspective, they could say, well, we could do all that cleanup for a lot less than $2 million, so you're getting a good deal there because you're getting it below fair market value. But again, that's just a clarifying thing with when you come talking about fair market value in this space. So I'm putting up some notional examples. It's highlighted there, very notional. Aerial is the hospital. That blue parcel of land, we want to do something. The Navy said, hey, that's excess. They didn't really say that. It's all notional. Just making sure. Notional, record that. In this particular example, Navy says, hey, let's put it up in the process. And hey, the Department of Veterans Affairs, they're looking for land. They say, hey, we're interested. We're interested in that. And so in this particular case, the Department of VA says, hey, we want to build our clinic there and we want to own that property. The property would be transferred to the VA. It would become theirs and added to their real property records, and they would have full access to that land to do what they wanted on that land. So that's an example of a federal transfer, a notional example. Excess property for the surplus. Surplus category, no federal agency wants it. So now let's look at it for a public benefit conveyance, PBC. So that's an important term here that some of you might not necessarily want to dabble in. Public benefit conveyance, again, convenience to state or local government. Sometimes the nonprofit. It can be conveyed at 100% discount for fair market value. So it's a pretty good deal. Federal government is giving you this land. But to do that, it has to be two things. It has to be for a public benefit, and it has to be a qualifying use. That's not an all-inclusive list of qualifying use, but there's a few. That's the part of the list. Homeless services, corrections, law enforcement, public health, drug rehab, education, and there's others. So that's what happens first. Hey, we got a qualifying use, and it's going to be for the public if we're interested. Another notional example. They offer it up, state, local government, nonprofits. HUD looks at it and says, yeah, that could be, we could do some homeless services there. It's qualified, it's verified. In this particular example, some of those qualifying events, there's a project sponsor at the federal level that's responsible for all of them. So if you want to do it for transportation, the DOT would have a say in that. Obviously for homeless, the HUD would be involved. They say, yep, we verify that is a qualifying event. It's a usable purpose of that land. And then GSA says, perfect, we got a match, we're going to convey the land. And we're going to give it to them for free. And a point of clarification that I didn't know that I found in researching this, the homeless services has kind of the trump card. So they get the first look. So this land gets sent up for this surplus. Homeless services says, yeah, we want it. Well, they get first look at it and can say, and that's what happens. The property's transferred to them, and that's what you get, and you don't have a lot of say in that process as that local municipality necessarily. All right. Another example of a surplus, and I put this one in because this is one we recently did, and this is a little bit of a departure from the process. So Air Force Enlisted Village is a community that's 501c3 in the Panhandle of Florida. The purpose of it is to provide housing for widowed military members, the spouses of military members that have been widowed. In this particular example, it's adjacent to Eglin Air Force Base. They had some property. It was neither at the time declared underutilized or excess. We met with them, got them to say it was excess, and then we went to Air Force higher headquarters and said, hey, we want to broker a deal. Matrix did this on their behalf. We said, we want to broker a deal between the Air Force and between the Air Force Enlisted Village, and made that deal happen. The property was transferred. It wasn't transferred through the GSA process, and so this is an important clarification. There is ways to go around that rule. In this particular case, it was through NDAA language that we had inserted into the NDAA to help facilitate that process. So it can get out of the norm, but it requires some congressional input to make happen. So just wanted to put that out there as an example that could bypass a process. There's always exceptions to the rule, but it took a lot to make that happen. It's a first of its kind from our understanding, certainly for the Air Force, but it made sense, and it was for a good purpose, and it was a win-win all around. All right, negotiated sale. Again, it goes through surplus. No one wants it for the qualifying event. So then it becomes surplus where a negotiated sale where they'll go back to the state or local government and say, hey, I understand you don't want to use it for those qualifying events, but are you interested in it? And are you interested in making it happen? And so in this case, a notional example of that, blue parcel, not offered up for a PBC, goes back, the city or town of Port Royal says, hey, we're interested in that. You know, we have some economic development goals. It's a good property, good frontage. We want to purchase that. Then they go into a negotiated sale with GSA. It would go then to the town of Port Royal, and they would become the owner of that property, along with any encumbrances that were on it. Okay, that's the negotiated sale. And then the last one is public sale. So if it goes through all of that process, it ultimately will go up to public sale. And public sale is just like it sounds. It's just like it was on Realtor.com. You could go out and find the property. In fact, I'd written it down here on my notes. You can actually go Google right now GSA properties for sale, and you can go to a listing just like an MLS, and you can click on it and say, oh, there's a property, oh, there's a property. Some of them that are sold and negotiated like a sealed bid, so you put in a bid in accordance with their instructions. They'll put it out for a certain period of time, or then the next one they'll actually go to auction. So they'll either do an internet auction or a live auction and auction off this property. Probably not the best property necessarily all the time if it's getting this far in the process, but it's still, if you want to become a landlord of former federal property, there's an option for you. Again, notional example. We got to this process, that parcel goes up, it's put out for bid. Mr. Stewart says, ooh, I'm in, I want it. And so he puts in a sealed bid. He gets the property, and then at that point it becomes no different than a normal transaction. If he wants to develop that, he goes through an entitlements process with the county, with the town, and goes through all the approvals, zoning, all of that. But it becomes a personally owned property versus a federal government owned property. So I cruised through those, so that was good. That was the dense part of this. All right, underutilized property. So underutilized offers a ton more flexibility. That's the key takeaway from this slide. ton more flexibility. It could be short and long term. Okay, you could give up some property. You can give up facilities for a certain amount of time for an entity that needed them through a lease or a traditional lease. But short and long term, the authority is lower. The authority remains at the local installation, sometimes the region within the Navy, but it's a much quicker decision because it's at a lower level. And then no ownership transfer. That's a big one, right? So ultimately you become a tenant on a DOD property. You don't have to deal with all the encumbrances and all the challenges that are part of that. And so that's a good thing if you are the tenant. And then there's a significant number of tools for consideration. Memorandum of Understanding, Memorandum of Agreement, MOU, MOA, Enhanced Use Lease, Land Swap. There's tons more. There's some that are even into the service arrangements. There's intergovernmental support agreements, an IGSA. In that case, the county could go to the installation and say, hey, you're hiring so-and-so for refuse collection, waste management, and we provide that service here locally. We'll do that for you, and then you can save some money in the process. It helps us because we can hire some more people. You can enter into those agreements. The legislation's there. So it's not always real property. There's a bunch of different ways you can get into that. But the key there, a significant number of tools, very flexible, and really the world's your oyster in terms of coming up with cool ideas that make sense for both parties. MOA and MOU, difference there. Memorandum of Agreement is when resources are traded. So there's either money or manpower or something along those lines that drives a Memorandum of Agreement. Memorandum of Understanding is typically, oftentimes between like DOD entities, or say the Coast Guard wanted to take some space on the Naval Hospital in a wing of the hospital. They would do that through a Memorandum of Understanding. The Navy would say, we will provide this space for you, we'll cover your utilities and this and that, you'll pay us back X amount a month kind of thing. But that's kind of how those are dealt. Simple, local, the local judge advocate reviews them, approves them, all done at the local level. An example of this, Laughlin Air Force Base, Del Rio, Texas. If anyone knows where Del Rio is, spend any time there, it's probably not it's not quite like here. There's not a lot of people coming there. Purposeful. But it's right down near the border of Mexico. But ultimately, the Air Force Base, the kids on the Air Force Base, all of the dependents were having to go like 30 miles to school every day. And the base said, hey, you guys need to do better for us. We'd like something closer. And so working with ISD, the independent school district there, they came up with an idea and said, well, we'll do that. We can kind of bring in a magnet charter school, a paid school, ultimately, but we will provide facilities. We will provide the teachers, all your school supplies. We will do that all for you on the installation or near the installation. The installation came back and said, hey, we will provide this portion of property to the installation for you to do that. They struck a deal through an MOA, and next thing you know, they moved temporary facilities, but they have a magnet school set up for the military right there. The ISD's getting revenue generated through the attendance of the students, and then but the ISD's also bypassing capital improvements costs, or at least deferring them, because they don't have to make improvements to expand their existing facilities. So it's a win-win situation, and done through an MOA. The next one is an enhanced use lease. So it's basically a lease. The government has leases and then enhanced use leases. The key with the enhanced use lease, the main key is that it's fair market value. So the government has to get fair market value for that property. Enhanced use leases cannot exceed 75 years, and they have to be competitive. So that's an important part of this process as we go through and we say, hey, maybe there's an EUL opportunity. Well, the opportunity that this group comes up with and presents may not be the opportunity that the government selects because it's competitive. So other people would be able to come and say, well, I got this idea. And ultimately, the government will have to decide which one. if we are bringing that solution, as Neil mentioned earlier, a plan versus an idea, if we've socialized our plan, brought it forward, then perfect. That's gonna do well for the community versus the guy that has the idea. But that is something that separates the two. The other part of that is the last bullet. At least 50% of the proceeds stay local. So in a normal lease, they get paid, it goes to Treasury. The base doesn't necessarily reap the reward there. So does that necessarily incentivize them to take part in these transactions and track them and all of the bureaucracy that goes around them? Not necessarily. When you get into an EUL, there's tangible benefit at the local installation, which goes a long way. And it can be payment in the form of cash, or it can be in-kind consideration. And that in-kind consideration can be anything. In the next 2 slides, I'll show you some examples of that. So Eglin Air Force Base, this is kind of the EUL like poster child. This was one of the first and one of the best examples. Eglin Air Force Base, for whatever reason, had beachfront property in Okaloosa Island. So pretty valuable real estate, but they weren't using it. They were significantly underutilizing the property, put it that way. So the community got together, they got together with a couple developers and said, hey, perfect place for a hotel. Holiday Inn said, yeah, we'll build a hotel there. So entered into an EUL with the Holiday Inn. They built this beautiful property, beachfront. They give discounts, obviously pretty significant discounts to military members and their families. So it becomes then you got constant tourism coming through just from the DOD that's in that area, which there's a lot of it. And then it's revenue generating. So Holiday Inn's happy, the DOD's happy. This one though goes a step further, and you can't see it in this picture, but I was just down there and drove by it. There's a beach ball on top of the hotel. It looks like a beach ball, but it's got a couple antennas and wires coming out of it. Well, that beach ball is actually a radome for a radar that's pointed out towards the test range, and so they can track their aircraft out on the test range from the top of this hotel. You drive by, it looks like a beach ball, but it's actually serving a military purpose as well. So it's a really cool example, and really one of the first of its kind that kicked a lot of this EUL conversation off. The next one is one that hits there we go, close to home for me. I am an Air Force Academy graduate, so the best service academy. I don't know if anyone else went to those other ones, but it's by far the best. If anyone's ever been to the Air Force Academy though, unlike Annapolis where you walk out the gate and you are in town and life is good. Similar with West Point, you got to walk a little farther, but it's still walkable. You get to the Air Force Academy, it's probably purposeful because they built those other 2 first, and they're like, yeah, they need to be pushed back a little bit. You go through the gate, and you got like 7 or 8 miles before you get to the building, and it's beautiful, Rocky Mountains, etc. But the Visitor Center to support the Air Force Academy, which is now on the National Historic Register, a historic place, was like way up behind the campus. So you had to drive all that way up there, which was it was not a big deal until September 11th. They decided, well, maybe we need to lock things down a little bit. And so now, based on that, it was not great access. So for the longest time, the Academy wanted to move that property. They wanted to move that visitor center to the front. Well, when you're talking about new F-35s and, new ISR capabilities and other things, and then you're saying, well, we need a visitor center over here at the Air Force Academy. Doesn't really prioritize very well in terms of getting funded. Bring in some donor funds from the AOG, the Association Graduates, that helps get a little money there, but ultimately they didn't have a solution. So now it's ongoing right now at the Air Force Academy. Matrix was heavily involved. In fact, our founder is actually the developer of this property, and we're doing all the civil engineering work there. But this property now will create a visitor center. That's in-kind consideration. The Air Force gave up some property right there on the interstate, right at the North Gate. They gave up the property, in-kind consideration. They're getting a brand new visitor center. But from an economic development perspective, they're also getting a new hotel, a new commercial space as well, a new convention center, and it's part of the Colorado Springs City of Champions. It's one of their final final City of Champion monuments or locations. They have like the Olympic Training Center or Olympic Museum and some other stuff. But anyway, so this property, probably the most complex, the most complex EUL in history. It also involves like a TIF was created as part of this. There's donor funds. There's all sorts of stuff, all sorts of moving parts. $370 million bonded right now to do this work. But ultimately, this is, when it's done, will be a showcase right there at the north gate of the Best Academy. And so it's a pretty cool example of what can be done. All right, key takeaways on all that. There's lots of tools and options. I didn't highlight all of them, but there are a lot of options out there. What does that mean from a consultant perspective? That means let's not zero in on something. Let's go look at all the options, all the permutations, and get creative, because we can. The legislation, the process affords us that opportunity. More than one tool can be applied. We don't need to look at the 120 acres. We can go look at, you know, maybe the 10 acres in the corner, there's some utility infrastructure that needs to be built out. Well, that's a perfect example. At Nellis Air Force Base, Nellis said, hey, you can have this corner of property for the city, so they could build a new sanitary or new wastewater treatment plant. They needed a new plant. They said, yeah, you can have this property. In kind consideration, we need a new gym. Our fitness center sucks. And so what happened? They gave them the property. The city was able to construct a new wastewater treatment plant, and we were able to, the Air Force was able to build a new gym. But again, that wasn't the whole property, it was a portion of it. At the hospital, there's a lot of options there that we could look at and look at what makes the most sense. It also includes utilization of facilities. I mentioned that. If the hospital is underutilized, well, maybe we can move some functions in there and start generating some revenue for the Navy. Maybe there's an option there. Underutilized is the best option. That's what I would, as your consultant, I would say that's where we want to get them. We want underutilized at this point in time, because that means we can be, the community can be part of the process all the way to the end. As soon as it gets into that excess surplus, the community gets cut out a little bit, and you can't necessarily influence change as much as you want to do. And then the last one, I just foot stomping, I think I mentioned it already, BRAC. BRAC does not exist right now. While it is a great option, it's not happening today anywhere on the horizon, and so we should take that out of our lexicon. I gave you some education, but let's not focus on that right now. We're not talking BRAC, we're talking about mission growth, we're talking about taking advantage of the opportunity. All right, so our approach. I think I'm all right on time. First step is discovery. We've been doing that. Been on contract with y'all for almost 12 months, as I said. Still on contract. We're doing a lot of that daily. We're researching the NDAA. We're engaging the VA. We're engaging the other services. We're looking at successful initiatives elsewhere that we could change around a little bit. Maybe it would work here. We're doing all of that, and we're going to continue to do that. Duration is through the. That's what you got from us. That engagement and that research. That's what we do. Visioning. So this is going to be the second ask. Neil mentioned the first is we're going to get a charter. We're going to need you guys to, the city and the town and the county and the chamber, MEC, to appoint some members to be part of this task force. Our next workshop, the next phase is let's do a visioning workshop. I'm giving you the high level stuff, but we need 1 or 2 days to sit in a room, to whiteboard it, put stuff on the walls, come up with some ideas, and really kind of explore what's out there. Listen to subject matter experts. Bring in someone that wants the cyber center here, for example. Well, let's talk about it. What's that all about? Does that fit a need? Bring in our campus, our academia, get some ideas out there. But ultimately, a visioning workshop to say, hey, what's our overall goal that we all agree upon that could happen to this property? And then what are some initial courses of action or brainstorming that we could do to say, yeah, that's worth exploring a little more. That's worth exploring a little more. That one we don't want to do. But we need to schedule a visioning workshop. Tentatively looking at the first, that 7 to 11, that week in November, as a potential option. And out of that, we're obviously going to summarize everything that happens. Next step, course of action development, COA development. So all of those good ideas at the visioning workshop, you give them to us, we go run with them for a little bit. engage all the stakeholders and the key players, and then we kind of come back with something that's a little more fleshed out than just a good idea, and we look at all of them. Then we perform a SWOT analysis, strengths, weakness, opportunities, threats. We kind of go through that, analyze that, rack and stack those, prioritize them based on some established criteria, and say, here's our primary COA, here's our throwaway COA, because the DoD wants one of those. It's an option that's not going to happen, so they can say, yeah, we don't want that one. We knew that already, but we'll give it to you anyway. And then a couple others. And so we'll take those COAs. We will present them to this body, as well as to start socializing them a little bit with our DoD friends to say, hey, what are you feeling here? What makes the most sense to y'all? And the excuse me, too much talking. But the goal in that process is to have some more fleshed out ideas that we can socialize and get some input on, and with the ultimate goal of down selecting the primary COA that we want to, be the plan. And so we will go through that process. We'll complete and generate these COAs with enough supporting documentation that folks won't ask too many questions. They'll understand, and then we'll run with that and get input from the key stakeholders in the process. Tentatively, by the end of the calendar year is kind of where we're looking for. That would be ideal, and you'll see that a little aggressive. Is that a little aggressive? I was told to make it aggressive.
I appreciate the ambition.
All right, COA review. After that, I already talked about that. That would take part. COA generation. See, we just bought a month there. COA generation by the end of the calendar. Got a little ahead of myself. COA review, kind of the first month of January. We do all of our socialization. So that's an extra 30 days. So that's pretty good. Pretty good. Last step: put together an implementation plan. And the key is that bottom milestone and date, April 28th ish. That's a good date from a federal perspective. That's when all of your services, they're putting in their inputs, they're sending them over, excuse me, getting ready to send them over to the Hill, to OSD, so that they can start doing the rack and stack for the NDAA for the following year. And so that's kind of the goal there, to have something that is pretty well fleshed out, so that we know if we need legislative language, we think we need language, we can get it generated, teed up at that point in time, so that it can feed in and streamline a process. What that implementation will include: all the details on the course of action, probably the process that we use to get there, to demonstrate the collaboration that went into this, some of the coordination with the services. But then the key thing there is that plan of action, milestones, POAM. I don't know if you all heard that. It's pretty widely spread in the DoD. Doesn't really make sense sometimes, but we use it anyway. But it really is a useful tool, because it's going to lay out all the steps necessary to move our plan forward, as well as some duration, as well as resourcing, as well as POCs, frankly, that are going to be responsible. And so it's a very helpful tool. It helps for budgeting perspective. If you know that in your next cycle you're going to need to kick in a little, or try to help support this initiative, you can do that. But that's a key tool there for implementation that we do on all of our projects, and that's going to be part of our final, call it final deliverable for this effort. How do I go? Next steps, perfect, and right on time-ish. All right. We talked about this already, kind of establish this Defense Community Partnership Project task force, you can call it. The name is, Ian and I were going back and forth about 10:45 last night of what we wanted to call it. So name is still up. We can do that in a visioning session. First step, figure out the name we want. Chartered group, clear delineated goals, objectives, and timelines, and the focal point for this effort. So it'll be a smaller group doing the nug work, making the sausage, and then they will be expanded and presenting to the larger audience on probably a quarterly basis to say, hey, here's where we're going, or maybe even bi-monthly basis, just to keep everyone abreast of the progress. And then the visioning workshop, tentatively planned for November 8th or 9th. Ideally, that's
Just reminding about election days, we may need to take a look at that.
Oh yeah, good point. Good point. I was looking at my calendar, and I figured that I'm the most important to that. Actually, my boss's calendar. But yeah, we're flexible there. We're flexible there. Participants, again, will include the smaller group, and probably a commitment, though, of try to get 2 full days of engagement. This is a lot of nug work, and it's fun, but it's also getting everyone in the room and focus is important to make sure that is productive time. And then the only other thing that's on the slides, and I just want to foot stomp again, all of these community partnership initiatives are really, 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 really reliant on everyone here in the room. Again, I'm going to come in, we're going to help. We're going to help lead you to water. We're going to say, hey, we've tried that over here. It didn't work, but you're welcome to try it again. But ultimately, when rubber meets the road, it's going to be relying on city government. It's going to be relying on county government. It's going to be reliant on, folks within the community. It's going to be relying on your local private sector to get engaged. It's very important that and again, why it's a collaborative, community-driven effort, because ultimately that's where you're going to find success. Any questions?
Okay, at this point, the folks that got questions, please go ahead and fire away.
Carlton, you had...
Real quick, from a question perspective, we're going to bring the mic since we are recording just to make sure it gets captured.
Yeah, Zachary, that's a great presentation, very informative. Thank you very much for all the work you put into it. I'd have just a couple of questions, and it may be too early, but will foreign EB5 investors be allowed to invest in those projects going forward? And you can just reply to that later if that's better appropriate.
Well, I would tell you that I'll give you an example. At Arkansas, in that particular example, is foreign military sales is where we're trying to help them grow their mission. Mm-hmm. We're also doing a lot of work at Mountain Home Air Force Base. Mountain Home already has the RSAF, Royal Singaporean Air Force there, foreign government, but they're already training there, investing a ton of money in capital improvements there. They also have Qataris, it was recently announced, are also going to bed down there with like $300 million. So certainly from a defense related, there's significant opportunity there. I would have to get back to you from a non-governmental agency perspective.
Yeah, foreign syndicate. The second one is, one of the things I have been very fortunate to be involved with is the MEC and the Economic Development Corporation. And one of the things that those leaders have sort of encouraged me to do is to try to build support across the Broad River. And we've been doing that to the best of our ability. But if there can be involvement by those groups and places south of the Broad, I think that helps mobilize even more political juice behind this effort, and I applaud the effort and everything that's been done so far. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.
Hi, I'm John O'Toole with Economic Development. My thoughts are around looking at your process and just looking at transportation projects most recently in the county. Like, without public involvement and transparency, people get a little concerned about what the outcomes are. And as you outlined that, I might ask if that's a consideration, because even when you describe the sausage making with the smaller group, we've done economic development projects now for 5 years in the county, and by being as transparent as possible, we get less resistance for the outcome. So I'm wondering if that's a thought as you're building out that process.
Absolutely, and that was probably my brevity running through that. I mean, all of these, every compatible use plan we develop, just like a comprehensive plan, there is steps in that process to make sure that the public is engaged. So initial visioning would be very, very targeted to kind of get some ideas, but ultimately through survey, through actual open houses and other things, definitely would want to bring the public in, and that would be part of that kind of COA review timeline where we're looking at some different options.
So what we envision with this process is to get out there and do the actual work sessions as well. So the in-stride briefs would be concurrent with those work sessions at the city level, the town level, the county level, and then in addition to those open houses where we can do that. The other thing too that I just want to add is that through this process, we're probably going to have some ad hoc committees, some subject matter experts, what we call SMEs, that come in and brief the group in order to explore all the different options. So we may call someone from the school that create also from TCL or from UCB or from wherever the site would come in and give us that input.
I had a question. This is about time. Okay. Just a simple thing. The VA initiative for the 100,000 square feet and 500 parking spaces. Is there still time to look at that on this property, or is that window too short?
I think there's still time, but I would say the window's closing. I think that's, and again, I would tie that a little bit to the aggressiveness of the schedule. You know, it's time to have some of those conversations. We're going to see several of those folks here at the end of October at a small business conference, and that it will be a topic that we're engaging maybe even before that. But yeah, absolutely, there is a window there. Thankfully, the federal acquisition process is not too streamlined, so that helps. But yeah, definitely worth pushing that as a potential idea to see if there's even any interest from the VA.
Well, Zachary, thank you for a comprehensive presentation. Thank you. Thank you for a comprehensive presentation. I also want to thank the members of the MEC and leadership and the Chamber for bringing us all together. Had a lot of quiet conversations with many of you about being a worried man, the saber rattling about Parris Island through DOD and Marine Corps, and then what we know about the Naval Hospital. So I think it's timely that we figure out what we want and then go tell the federal government what it is. I'm excited about the visioning workshops coming up in November, and we'll find you an appropriate appointee. And I think we as a community have some ideas about what might go on that site, right? Cybersecurity, expansion of higher education institutions, private sector redevelopment, and all those things are worthy of consideration. But will you be able to bring in, or will you provide maybe some subject matter experts on things that we might not know as a possibility? I know Coast Guard has been batted around. The Charleston Navy Yard's got Homeland Security training opportunities. So I have to imagine that there are some federal agencies that are looking for a location for whatever it is, but we might not even be aware of those opportunities. So will you bring some of that to us?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I mentioned it earlier. We partner with the Roosevelt Group, and they are the premier firm when it comes to kind of lobbying and working with both Congress and the DOD, and they have subject matter experts from all the services, and so we have a direct line with them to ask those questions and get that feedback. They're working all over, but for Virginia up north, down in Florida as well. So there's plenty of places to go ask those questions. But yeah, absolutely right. And we'll also look from an economic perspective. I know John's got it pretty locked up, but we do a lot of economic impact analysis, and we do a lot of looking at market sectors and different things like that. And so that will be another example where we've seen, hey, they've done this at this location and it's worked very well. So potentially that's something that's not been on your radar, but maybe it should be.
Any other questions? All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you today for representing an opportunity for us to actually drive a solution instead of being the recipients of a solution that we don't particularly care for. Again, Ian Scott is going to be putting the ask out for members to the task force. That'll be happening very, very rapidly, and we're going to be moving on. Any final words?
Yeah, I just want to wrap up a little bit quickly. First of all, thank you to our funding partners. Beaufort County, City of Beaufort, Town of Brook. We would not be here without their support. So that is the first and foremost point. Again, just to reiterate, the purpose is to grow and protect the military missions in our region. Straightforward, very simple. And I think what Zachary said earlier is an opportunity. And everybody in this room should be excited about that word, opportunity, to provide a united front. We need to do this. And I think to establish trust in our community about what's going to be moving forward, we have to provide a united front. I don't care what's been going on last week, last month, 10 years ago. This is essential to our community and our region to continue to grow and protect the military mission and stance and longevity here in Beaufort. So how are we going to do it? So a few more final points. We've got expert help through Matrix. They're the right people at the right time for the right job. Collaboration with our stakeholders. Collaboration is super important in this process. We're going to debate internally, but externally, a united front. Debate internally, externally, united front. We're going to follow a process. The process has been laid out. It's been tried and true. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. And again, this is the beginning. And the next step is to have that visioning group, have that stakeholder group, and just, I hope you're excited about the possibility. I'm sure you've got like 20,000 things churning in your head right now. Get with somebody who's going to be on that visioning task force and share some ideas with them. But be proud that you're in this room and be proud that you're a part of this process. We're very excited about the future, and it starts today. Thank you.
Thank you, folks. Have a great day.